Imagine you're sitting around a campfire. Not 100 years ago, not 1,000 years ago. Try 50,000 years ago. The sun has disappeared behind the horizon. The temperature is dropping. Somewhere in the darkness, predators are moving through the trees. There are no cities, no governments, no money, no civilization, just a few humans, a fire, and a lot of smoke. Now here's the strange question. What if some of those humans were already smoking? Not cigarettes, not cigars, not even tobacco, but intentionally breathing in the smoke of certain plants because they liked what it did to their minds. Think about that for a second. What if smoking is older than civilization itself? Because the more archaeologists investigate ancient human behavior, the weirder this story becomes. And it might force us to rethink where one of humanity's oldest habits actually came from. Let's start with something obvious. Before anyone could smoke anything, humans needed fire. And fire is ancient, really ancient. Evidence from archaeological sites suggests that our ancestors were controlling fire nearly 1 million years ago. 1 million. That's so far back that Homo sapiens didn't even exist yet. Imagine that. Your distant relatives sitting around campfires hundreds of thousands of years before modern humans appeared. And every single one of them was inhaling smoke. Every day, every night, for generations. Smoke wasn't a choice. It was part of life. But then, something interesting happens. Not all plants create the same smoke. Some plants release chemicals that affect the brain. Others contain compounds that can reduce pain. Some can make you sleepy. Some can make you see things that definitely are not there. Which raises a fascinating possibility. What if ancient humans accidentally discovered this? Imagine throwing random plants onto a fire. A few minutes later, everyone feels different. Maybe calmer, maybe happier, maybe strangely connected. Maybe convinced that the guy across the fire is suddenly giving incredible life advice, even though he's been staring at a rock for 20 minutes. Here's where things get weird. Humans are incredibly good at noticing patterns, especially patterns connected to survival or pleasure. If one plant made people feel better, wouldn't they remember it? Wouldn't they try it again and again and eventually on purpose? This idea isn't as crazy as it sounds. Anthropologists have proposed that early humans likely experimented with plants long before agriculture existed. Not through science, through trial and error, very dangerous trial and error. The kind where sometimes you discover medicine, and sometimes you discover why nobody eats that plant anymore. But over thousands of years, knowledge accumulates. People learn. Stories get passed down. Children watch adults. Traditions form long before writing existed, long before history books. Now here's the problem. How do you prove any of this happened? That's where archaeology becomes frustrating. Stone tools survive for millions of years. Plant leaves don't. Wooden pipes don't. Bundles of herbs don't. Most evidence simply disappears. It's like trying to reconstruct an entire movie after someone deleted almost every frame, which means ancient smoking habits are incredibly difficult to detect, but not impossible. In 2019, researchers uncovered something remarkable in the Utah desert. They found evidence of wild tobacco use dating back roughly 12,000 years. 12,000. That is older than farming in many parts of the world. Older than cities. Older than writing. Older than civilization itself. Now, does that automatically prove people were smoking it? Not exactly. But it proves humans were interacting with tobacco far earlier than many experts once believed. And that's where the mystery deepens. Because tobacco wasn't the only psychoactive plant available to ancient humans. Not even close. Different regions had different plants, different chemicals, different traditions, different experiments. If people in North America were using tobacco thousands of years before civilization, what were people doing elsewhere? What were people in Africa burning? What were people in Asia inhaling? What were people in Europe discovering around their campfires? We don't know. And that's what makes this story so fascinating. The evidence we have may only represent a tiny fraction of what actually happened. Think about that for a second. Human history stretches back hundreds of thousands of years. Written history covers only a tiny sliver of it. Most human experiences vanished without leaving a record. Now let's make things even stranger. Across nearly every culture ever studied, humans seek altered states of consciousness. Everywhere. Different languages, different continents, different religions, Same behavior. People drink alcohol, chew leaves, eat mushrooms, meditate, fast, dance for hours, inhale smoke again and again. Why? One theory comes from psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel. He proposed something called the intoxication drive. The idea is surprisingly simple. Humans may possess a natural desire to alter consciousness, not as a cultural invention, not as a mistake, but as a built-in part of being human. And here's the crazy part. Animals seem to do it too. Elephants seek fermented fruit. Birds consume naturally occurring alcohol. Reindeer have been observed eating psychoactive mushrooms. Apparently, getting weird is not exclusively a human hobby. If that drive is real, then ancient humans discovering psychoactive smoke becomes much more believable. Not inevitable, but believable. Because they weren't looking for smoking. They were exploring consciousness. Smoking was just one method, and perhaps one of the earliest. But then, something unexpected happens. Smoking doesn't remain recreational or spiritual. It becomes medicine. Ancient civilizations across the world developed forms of medicinal smoke. Egyptians inhaled herbal fumes. Ancient Indian medical texts describe specific smoking treatments. Greek physicians recommended various inhaled remedies. Now, from a modern perspective, that sounds completely backwards. Treating breathing problems with smoke? Really? But remember, they weren't inhaling industrial chemicals. They were experimenting with plants containing active compounds. Some worked, some didn't. Some probably made things much worse. Human medical history is full of ambitious experiments. Let's just say the scientific method took a few thousand years to warm up, yet the basic idea survived. Deliver medicine through the lungs. We still do that today. Asthma inhalers, anesthetic gases, nebulizers. The technology changed. The principle remained. And that tells us something important. Humans weren't simply fascinated by smoke. They were discovering what it could do, physically, psychologically, socially. Which brings us to perhaps the most important piece of this puzzle: community. Imagine sitting around a fire with 20 other people, everyone sharing the same experience, the same stories, the same emotions, the same altered state. Anthropologists believe shared rituals create social bonds, trust, identity, cooperation, the kinds of things that help groups survive. In other words, smoking may not have just changed individual minds. It may have strengthened communities. A ritual around a fire isn't just entertainment. It's social technology. And social technology helped build human societies long before cities ever appeared. Which brings us back to our original question. What if humans smoked before civilization? The honest answer is surprisingly simple. They probably did. Not cigarettes, not modern tobacco products, but some form of intentional smoke inhalation appears to stretch incredibly far into our past, possibly thousands of years before cities, possibly before farming, maybe even before civilization was an idea anyone could imagine. We'll probably never know exactly when it started. The evidence is too fragile, too old, too incomplete, but the clues point in one direction. Humans have been experimenting with smoke for a very long time, maybe almost as long as we've been gathering around fires. And there's something strangely poetic about that. Before kingdoms, before writing, before roads, before money, there was fire, there was smoke, and there were humans trying to understand what happened when they breathed it in. Somewhere in the darkness, tens of thousands of years ago, someone noticed that a particular plant made them feel different. They remembered, they repeated it, they shared it. And that tiny moment may have echoed through human history all the way to the present day. What if smoking is older than civilization? We may never know for certain, but the possibility itself tells us something fascinating. Long before humans built civilizations, they were already exploring their own minds.